Oh hey, I didn't see you there. Do you find this rabbit attractive? Be honest. If you do, for one, you're weird. And for two, it's probably because of anthropomorphism. But that's not an excuse.
Too crispy.
Anthropomorphism is a big fancy word for giving human traits to non-human things, like an animal or an inanimate object, and it takes many different forms. Sandy Cheeks is a proud Texan that walks on two legs and does karate. Anthropomorphism. Is this faucet having an existential crisis? Anthropomorphism. Do you push your Yorkshire Terrier in a little pink stroller? But she likes it, she's just a baby. Anthropomorphism. That is going to become a difficult word to say. And you might be thinking, well, why anthropomorphism? Why take issue with this specific aspect of design? Well, when something feels out of place in a story or a world that goes contrary to what's already been established, it can take you out of the experience. It can break the immersion that makes getting lost in a fictional world so fun. And for a while now, something has felt off to me about the designs of certain Pokémon. So I want to narrow down, categorize, put into words why I love this rabbit, but I hate this one. And I see these kind of topics come up online, comparing newer Pokemon designs to older Pokemon designs. And there's always these arguments between the teenagers who grew up playing Sun and Moon and the 40-year-olds who never played a game past Gen 1. Pokemon are literally trash now. When I was growing up, we had fire like Charizard and Squirtle.
Pokemon have always had bad designs. Have you seen Geodude? Bro is literally a rock.
And I know it's not just the nostalgia talking, because there are a lot of newer Pokemon designs that I like a lot, and older ones that I don't like at all. Don't be fooled by the giant Psyduck. These are just the only Pokemon that make plushes for at Target, but I love them all the same. Isn't he just breathtaking?
Wow.
But I've noticed that the ones that stand out to me the most in recent years are the more person-shaped variety. But I think it's important to recognize that there are different types and different levels of anthropomorphism, which I'll discuss as we go on. But it's not a black and white issue, though black and white did have some of the worst examples of this. But it requires a more nuanced look, let's put it that way. My hope is that through comparing and contrasting how anthropomorphic form has been used in Pokemon over the years, I'll be able to narrow down why certain designs have been giving me this feeling. One caveat I want to make is that I want to refrain from talking too much about the Pokemon anime, because being an anime, almost every single Pokemon is over-anthropomorphized. And I am not an expert on this, I just started learning about this topic, so if I get some things wrong, please forgive me. But I read a paper that I found very useful in understanding anthropomorphism a little more, and I'll link that in the description if you're interested. But it describes 4 different types of anthropomorphism, namely structural, gestural, character, and aware. The way that these categories of anthropomorphic form were coined, according to the researchers behind the paper, was by asking one question. When analyzing the design of a character, what aspect of human form is being imitated? With the structural form, it would be the physical outer appearance of the human body or features. With gestural, it would be the way that humans communicate with their body. With the form of character, it would be traits or roles of a person. And with aware, the way that humans relate to themselves and one another. We'll go into each one a little deeper, but with over 1,000 Pokemon to look at, I had to ask myself first, what really counts as anthropomorphic form? It can be a little hard. Test this out. I'm going to show you 4 Pokemon. Now, of these 4, which ones would you categorize as anthropomorphic by definition? This is where the research paper comes in handy. It has this key of questions that you can ask about the different categories to see which category something falls under. But all of these at the bottom have a pretty similar question. Does it have to be anthropomorphic? And this question confused me. What, to have anthropomorphic form, it has to be anthropomorphic? Duh. But I thought hard about it, and I found it simpler to rephrase the question this way. Does this creature have to be resembling a human in order to look the way that it does? Or could it be resembling something else? Now, when you ask that question, it becomes a little more clear. Klefki is an inanimate object that is alive, but does it have to be human in order to be alive? No. Life isn't exclusive to humans. Typhlosion is an animal-like creature that often stands on two legs like a human would, but do you have to be human to stand on two legs? Not necessarily. Plenty of animals like bears, kangaroos can stand on two legs, so this wouldn't necessarily qualify either. Xatu, though, obviously has Native American influence, but its design appears to be based more on Native American objects, such as a totem, than any human characteristic. Xatu wouldn't have to be human to look this way. But if we look at Smeargle, are its characteristics specifically human? Yes. No other living creature, at least that Smeargle resembles, could be found painting with a paintbrush. And you won't find any other creature with a beret-shaped head either. So Smeargle would be considered anthropomorphic. It has to be imitating humans. So with this understanding in mind, what is structural anthropomorphism? The structural form of anthropomorphism is described as imitating the construction and operation of the human body with a focus on materiality. Which basically means, does it look like a human? The example of this that they gave in the article is one of these. This is a figure model used for drawing a lot of the time. Just by looking at it, you don't necessarily get any personality from it or anything, but materially, physically, it very closely resembles the human form. So it seems that structural anthropomorphic form is the most basic form of anthropomorphism, being merely physical. And this is all over the place in Pokemon. In Gen 1, some of the more obvious examples would be like Machoke and Machamp, or Hitmonchan, Jinx. And I think there's an interesting difference to be made with the Pokemon that look or appear to be wearing clothing. It could fall into a couple different categories, depending on the design and what it evokes when you look at it. I think an indicator of whether or not it would be considered structural would be, does it evoke some kind of personality? Sure, Machoke has a champion's belt, but does it as a character recognize that? Does that change the way that it acts or its personality? And I would say probably not for some of these examples. I think in Gen 2 we really start to see well-implemented examples of this idea when it comes to clothing. Croconaw, if you look closely, it kind of looks like he's got a caveman outfit. But you're not necessarily going to think that first when you look at it. Same with maybe Blossom. You look at it and you can tell it's kind of a hula girl, but it makes sense with the design. It's very plant-like. Or Smeargle. Really unique implementation with his head being shaped like an artist's hat and his tail being the paintbrush. I think those are done really well. But still, with these designs, even as we go into Gen 3 with Ludicolo or Gardevoir, just by looking at them, you can suspend disbelief. These things could exist in the wild. These are creatures that could inhabit a lake or a forest. And we can address Lopunny for a second. This is intentional. Let's not kid ourselves. It's weird, but at least there is some subtlety to it. I mean, it's not like they put suggestive clothing on it or anything. Okay. And a lot of people take issue with Probopass. Yes, the mustache is a little
on the nose.
But what I like about it is that there's a reason for it. There's an explanation. That it's these small pieces of metal that have stuck into the magnet that is its nose. I like that kind of thing in the design. And kind of like I said earlier, Gen 5 is where things gonna go downhill a little bit. And I especially wanted to make a distinction between the Machamps and the Hitmonchans versus Throw and Sock. When you look at Throw and Sock, I mean, their clothes, it doesn't look natural. It's just so overt. I'm supposed to believe that this thing is just existing in the wild, and this uniform is a part of its body. I think even when you compare it to something like Hitmonchan, which obviously looks like it's wearing clothes, there's definitely a difference there. A little bit more creativity. Not even changing colors, not even changing the design at all. You put either one of them next to a picture of someone doing martial arts and it looks like the same exact outfit. Okay, let's remove a few polygons. N64 filter, let's put that on. Change the hue a little bit, and okay, yeah, that's Throw. They can't even get creative with the name! Honestly, Throw and Sock to me are some of the most creatively devoid Pokemon that there are. And that's why I think a lot of these Pokemon that are closer to human can become a lot lazier in their design. I don't like things being so overt. I like a little subtlety in my Pokemon designs. Some others that are done well in the later gens, I'd say, Oricorio. Buzzwole is one that really stands out to me. But one I do find genuinely funny and I think works really well. And in Gen 7, Decidueye is, I think, another good example of this. Yeah, it's wearing like a cloak. Or it looks like it's wearing a cloak, and it's obviously supposed to be an archer, but it's done very well. But, structural anthropomorphism is pretty much like the safe zone. Any Pokemon that kind of resembles a human shape, but doesn't push too far into making them more human, is the kind of designs I really don't take too much issue with. I think my main point here for the structural anthropomorphism is that I've always seen Pokemon as animals. I mean, that's what most of them are based on. Either animals or some kind of fantasy creature, but they're not meant to be equals to humans. Even in the Pokemon world, they don't live as equals to humans. You catch them, they live in the wild. They're kind of like pets. You take them in, yes, some of them live together, they become friends with one another, but generally, they're not human. So when you give them too many human traits, it pushes that a little bit into a place that's weird. So the next form of anthropomorphism is gestural. Now, an example of gestural anthropomorphism would be, say, if I was to offer this squirrel a nut. I said, "Squirrel, would you like a nut?" And he went, that would be a form of gestural anthropomorphism. Because this, the nod to indicate a yes, is a human thing. Squirrels don't do that. Examples of this would be motions or poses that express meaning, intention, or instruction. So this one is kind of a little hard to pin down just by looking at Pokemon designs on the surface, but I think some examples of this might be Wabbit. He's based on a Japanese comedian who would regularly put his hand up to his forehead as part of his routine. His catchphrase was, "That's the way it is, ma'am." Wabbit's Japanese name meaning, "That's the way it is." Pyukumuku has this arm thing that comes out and he does a wave that would fall into this category. These monkeys definitely have some human gestures going on here. Not quite sure what Simisear here is trying to communicate, but Simipour makes some gestures that I do not appreciate. And Quaxley, we'll get into him a little more later. I think he goes beyond this, but his little hair flip he does, I think, is definitely gestural. But ultimately, I think most examples of this are not a big deal. A lot of them go just to adding some personality. So after looking at structural and gestural anthropomorphism, I don't believe that this aspect of design is what feels out of place. Some Pokemon push the line, especially when it comes to poorly designed clothing-wearing Pokemon. But overall, these fit pretty well into the world of Pokemon. Now, the third type of anthropomorphism is where things get a little dicey. And this one is kind of the hardest one to understand, I think, when reading the paper. But the paper describes this category as having to do with specific details that would help define or describe something's character, or what they are like as a person, so to speak. These could be traits, habits, qualities that give you more information into something's societal role. You could maybe start to see where this could become problematic when we're giving societal roles to creatures that are supposed to be akin to animals. My example for this is Handsome Squidward. And there's one quote in particular from the paper that helped me to understand this a little better, where it said, "It is not only a man in a certain style of dress, it is a type of person with specific traits." When you look at Handsome Squidward, what comes to your mind? The first thing that comes to mind probably isn't the type of shirt that he has on, that he has a v-neck, or that he has a little belt here and not much covering up those. You see personality, you see character, you see longing, you see desire. So with this style of anthropomorphism, you're getting a lot closer to being human. I think maybe one of the best examples of Pokémon that are like this would be Incineroar. It kind of has the Machamp thing going on with the champion's belt. That part is even a little more natural, worked into its design. But when you look at its facial expressions, its gestures, and the way that it moves and acts in the game, it imparts a certain personality. You can tell what kind of person Incineroar is by even just looking at it. It kind of has this pompous, showy personality. Is it still animalistic to the point where you can suspend disbelief? Kind of. I mean, it's kind of towing the line there. But I think probably the most egregious example of this is with the Sobble line. And I think Gen 8 overall has a lot of the worst ones here. It's kind of stacked against Gen 8 on this topic. But look at Drizzile, whatever its name is. At this point, with this kind of design, you are imparting very specifically human emotion. It's an emo teen. And so when you give what is supposed to be like an animal, these kind of human traits to this point, it's just... Did I just put a frog in my pocket? Or did I just forcibly apprehend a depressed child? Yeah, you win! And Inteleon, I like even less. It's so overt. It's like, okay, let me pull out James Bond for the finishing move. Salazzle is another uncomfortable one. Why do I feel like she's gonna try to do things to me? It's not a personality I want a Pokemon to have. Oh great, and they're female only. Isn't that beautiful? I think a lot of it comes down to facial expression. I think if you look side by side at like Scraggy and Drizzile, two very similar designs, but the facial expression tells all. I mean, you look at Scraggy, he looks like he's just a lizard, just kind of existing in the natural world. And his design, yeah, it's making reference to something, but it doesn't seem like he's aware of it. You look at Drizzile and yeah, that's an emo child. The sagged eye and the look into the side and like thinking, I'm too good for this. It's subtle, but it matters. No. Reboot. Now let's talk about the rabbits. After talking about the Broodals in my last video, you guys are going to think I have a thing against rabbits. I don't have a problem with rabbits. What I do take issue with is when you try to tell me that this rabbit who inhabits the tall grass in the nearby forest was born with a Windbreaker. At this point, it's like, these are just clothes. Cinderace is wearing spandex. Reboot has a jacket on. What are we doing? Why are we doing this? And not even to mention the personality that they gave Reboot. All these middle stages, they're just giving them these like edgy teen vibes. Animals do not go through an edgy phase. Why are we acting like they do? Why are we making them lean against the wall like they disapprove of my music taste while they're listening to NF in their AirPods? This didn't come from the natural world. Humans did this.
It's Wabbit season.
So this kind of anthropomorphism, I think this is where it goes a little too far into human territory, a little uncomfortable, and sometimes just lazy. I think it takes a certain cleverness to design a character to where you kind of impart your own personality to it. You know, your pet cat, you meow at it, you act like it has a personality. That's you anthropomorphizing them. A Pokemon like Cyndaquil is like an animal that you impart your own personality onto because it's your pet. It's like Pokemon has gone a step too far with their designs and already anthropomorphized them for you. And of course, that's always going to be part of their designing, but I think it just, with certain examples like with Reboot or Inteleon or Drizzile, I think it goes too far. Now, the fourth type of anthropomorphism is the aware form. And this one, you're getting to the point where it's basically human. The paper describes it as imitating the human capacity for thought, intentionality, or inquiry. It also recognizes the social qualities of being human. Some things that would fall under this category would be possessing knowledge of oneself in relation to others, the ability to construct or manipulate abstract ideas, or the ability to participate with others towards a goal. The example the article gives is of R2-D2, which is an inanimate object, a robot, but it is self-aware, it's aware of others, and has the ability to work together with others and have opinions. Wait, Minion? What are you doing here? Judging me over here. My example is this Minion. Smugness is a very human emotion. You have to understand yourself in relation to others and think that you're better than them. And this way of designing characters specifically is my least favorite in Pokemon. There's one good example, and it's one that's kind of unexpected, but Mimikyu. You look at its design on the outside, you don't really see anything, but when you consider what kind of character it's supposed to be, the fact that it's self-aware enough to feel self-conscious and want to be like Pikachu in order to dress up, trying to become Pikachu, at that point you're pretty self-aware. You're constructing abstract ideas. And that one I think is done well. It's popular for a reason. But there are some examples where this I don't feel is done very well. And that would be with a couple of my least favorite starters. Snivy's a little brat. Look at that side eye. Even when I was a kid and Gen 5 was coming out, I was like, I don't like this one. And you could be like, oh, its eyes are just like that. Well, just look at the name of its fully evolved form, Superior. It believes it's superior. So I would put it in this category of aware, because I don't think there's a way for a character to be smug or to feel superior to others without falling under this description. And it's just kind of an icky trait in people. So when they try to attribute it to an animal, it feels icky also. And Quaxley, he's just so smug. It grosses me out. I talked earlier about the hair flip, and at this point, it's so far away from being an animal. I mean, look at Psyduck. You look at Psyduck, he's an animal. He may have some thoughts in there, maybe, if you look real deep, but let's be real. You could find him living in his own feces. Quaxley would never. So Quaxley, with its very human attitude and pompous personality, I personally, for the world of Pokemon, I think it's poor design. So after looking through the whole series, you can definitely find examples of anthropomorphism, some more than others in the older generations. But starting at Gen 5, and especially further on in Gen 8, I feel like there is a high concentration of these over-anthropomorphized characters. And of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. They're just character designs. But I think for being able to suspend your disbelief and absorb yourself into the world of Pokemon, having designs that stray too far into human territory is harmful to the immersion of the world. Thanks for watching. Even if you disagree with me, I have heated opinions on certain things sometimes. Whether you agree with me or not, tell me which Pokemon do irk you. Why do they irk you? Are they the ones that I mentioned? Are they completely different ones? There's so many to go over. I can't talk about all of them, but let me know which Pokemon get on your little nerve. deserves. At least for me, it's comforting to see the direction that Pokemon is going with their designs. When I look at Gen 9, it was hard for me to pick out anything that was over anthropomorphized besides the Quaxley line. I think going from Gen 8 to Gen 9 is a world of difference in the quality of Pokemon designs, and that excites me. I hope they continue doing that instead of going for more of those cheap, kind of gimmicky designs. So I hope your morning, afternoon was filled with delight. Give Handsome Squidward a kiss goodnight, and see you later.